Hey there, this is Liz Petzke. I'm the broker owner at Remax by the Lake here in Southwest Michigan. So I just wanted to chat with you kind of over my morning cup of coffee. I just have some thoughts I'd like to share kind of about all the really terrible news you've been hearing about buyers agents, commissions being paid by the seller and just kind of clear up a couple things. So one, let's first explain how a buyer's agent is compensated. So they can be paid one to two ways or a combination of both. So a seller could pay the listing brokerage, who then in turn pays the buyer's brokerage, who pays their agent. Or buyers could pay the buying brokerage directly at the time of closing, who then pays the buying agent, or a combination of both, right? So what's happening in these sits or burn it lawsuits is the claim that sellers didn't know they didn't have to pay a buyer's agent commission. I know our local forms have always made the amount the listing brokerage charges and also the amount that they're paying to the selling brokerage for procuring a buyer and concluding a successful sale very clear, right? So this has never been a requirement. And I've seen buyer's agent compensation anywhere from a meaningless $1, just to put that in, all the way up to 4% of the purchase price. This has always been and will continue to be negotiable. That's Realtor 101. Our first classes we're taking is that we can't talk about compensation with other agents. We cannot collude. We cannot talk about, what they charge versus what I charge. It's never been a set in stone thing. It's always been negotiable between the parties. So as a result, this lawsuit has sent down some extreme changes that I nor any other real estate professional that I've come across believe is going to benefit anyone, unfortunately. So the two big changes that are happening with this lawsuit that are supposed to be in place mid-July 2024, which I don't know how that's going to happen because with the changes with our MLS, which is software, the IDX, and how we feed to each other, those are very complicated. We're going to have to change forms and disclosures. That's going to be a lot to change. And also, this is not set in stone at this point. This is a proposed settlement. The court still has to accept it. And honestly, I'm hearing rumblings that the DOJ might get involved between now and then. Who knows? So right now, this is all up in the air. But just to give some clarification to what's actually happening. So one of the big changes is that before showing a home, all agents have to have a buyer agency agreement signed by the prospective buyer they're showing it to. So of course, my agency and my agents have always conducted a buyer's consultation with their prospective buyers who hire them. And these are signed prior to seeing any property. So at that point, they're discussing what their compensation is, how that's going to be paid, all of that. So that's all agreed upon before seeing property. So in a perfect world, this is going to happen, but it's not always perfect. And at times, agents are meeting prospective buyers at that first showing. So I think it's very presumptuous that a buyer is going to enter into a contract with that agent upon that showing, somebody they've met for the first time. I think buyers absolutely should do their research and interview prospective buyers agents before going into an exclusive agreement. This agreement also states what, if any, commission is to be owed to the buyer's agent's brokerage upon closing. So what happens if a buyer refuses to enter into this agreement? By these new laws, we cannot show them that property. I'm not entirely sure how this is all going to play out at this point. Another point to that too, buyers that decide to go unrepresented. So I think at that point, then they're going to be contacting the listing agent. So the listing agent's going to have to show them that property. Here in Michigan, we do allow dual agency. A lot of the agents in my office won't technically practice that, but it does allow for dual agency. So in this, the sense where somebody's going unrepresented, they call the listing agent. They can get a buyer's brokerage signed because they can enter into dual agency. Now, there are many states in our nation that do not allow dual agency. So if a buyer is going unrepresented without a buyer's agent and that listing agent isn't able to represent that buyer, I'm not sure how that's all going to come into play, how they're going to work that out. Right now, we just have to give a disclosure saying that, hey, I am the seller's agent. I am representing the seller. I'm not representing you as a buyer, just so you know that when I show that property. That's called an agency disclosure. And that's something that I see moving forward. Of course, we're going to continue to use, but these new laws are putting into place that we have to have a buyer's agency broker, agency signed at that point and goes over compensation. I just don't see buyers who are unrepresented signing that. So we'll see how that plays out. The big change, though, that I'm sure you've heard about, and that's been grossly misrepresented in the media. I'm hearing anything from now, this 3% that buyers agents have been paid is going to reduce housing prices, and that it's going to really be a huge injection into the market. Just bad information, which is really sad. But by this new requirement, we cannot offer buyer's agent compensation in the MLS. So again, this is not saying that a seller cannot pay some or all of the buyer's agent compensation, but that we just cannot use that MLS to offer a percentage or a flat fee to prospective buyer's agents. The exclusive buyer agency agreement that buyers into with a buying brokerage covers the amount that is due to the buyer's brokerage upon sale. However, anything offered to the buying brokerage from the listing brokerage is credited against it. So for example, if I, as a buying agent, charge 2% to my buyers for my services, and the listing brokerage offers 1% today, right? Because they can still put that in the MLS today, not in July, but we can negotiate for it, right? The buyers would be responsible for that 1% difference in closing. So why is this a problem? Well, right now, we have much higher interest rates than previous years. So that's a shock enough for buyers, right? They're paying a lot more monthly for the same price home that they would have 3 years ago. But we also have low inventory, right? So right now as a seller, if I don't have to move, I might be paying 2 or 3% on my mortgage. Why would I move and pay 7%, right? So most of the sellers we see moving right now and that we're working with are as a result of divorce or death, or a change in job, pretty much scenarios where they have to move, not a want to upgrade or a want to downgrade scenario. So we're already in this very competitive market, which is increasing prices, right? So prices are not coming down, again, despite whatever you've heard in the news, they're absolutely not shooting up the way that they have been in previous years. We're still at 1-2% per year, but with this low inventory, things aren't going to change. So right now, buyers may have to over list price to get their offer accepted. Also, if the seller is unwilling to pay some or all of the buyer's agent compensation, this further increases the amount of the cash the buyers have to bring to closing. So this further increases the leverage sellers have over buyers, not lessens it. So if a buyer decides to go unrepresented to save money or save this cost, the seller has all the leverage, and buyers, especially first-time home buyers, are being put in a precarious place where none of their interests are being protected. Who's going to manage this transaction? It's going to be the listing agent, and the listing agent has fiduciary duties and other sets of duties to protect their seller. So they're going to be working for their seller, not for you as a buyer. Secondly, this is kind of the worst thing of all of this, VA or Veterans Affairs mortgages. Those are available only to those who have served in the military. They're further going to be disenfranchised if a seller doesn't offer buyer's agent compensation, because a VA loan does not allow for the payment of the buyer to pay for buyer's agent compensation. I'll just let that settle in for a second. So those who have served our country either have to hope they find a property that offers buyer's agent compensation or go unrepresented. Similarly, for FHA and RD buyers, they aren't precluded, though, in this scenario from paying for buyer's agent compensation, but they often choose these programs because they require little to no down payment, and therefore our borrowers short on cash. So again, those who need that representation the most may have to forego it if the home they choose doesn't offer buyer's agent compensation. So look, I have a lot more thoughts on this, on how it will negatively impact both sellers and buyers. And I'm really sad for those who will no longer be able to have access to representation as a result of these lawsuits that were supposed to protect sellers and I guess buyers as well. Feel free to DM me if you want to have a further discussion on all the negative repercussions I see happening by these decisions of these decisions by people that clearly have no experience in this industry. Thanks for joining me for my cup of coffee and just hearing my 2 cents in this scenario. Have a great day.